like and subscribe, and leave a comment below. Beyond Antarctica, Chapter 35. The morning broke with the clatter of construction, the rhythmic pounding of wood and stone creating a steady hum in the air. The noise filled the camp, pulling everyone from their restless sleep. John stepped out of his tent, his eyes scanning the makeshift sanctuary around them. "Get up. Time to wake up," he called, giving the tents a firm bump with his foot. The crew stirred as he added, "We've got work to do." Kim emerged first, stretching her back with an exaggerated groan. "All these nice houses going up, and you had us sleep in our tents. I'm sore everywhere." She stretched her arms wide, cracking her neck for good measure. John chuckled. "You said it's all about the little ones. Until there's enough housing for everyone, we sleep in our tents." Todd strolled out next, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "At the rate these kids are working, we might be out of here in a couple of days. They're building like they've been at it their whole lives." Kim glanced over at the working children. Their hands moved with precision, each one playing a part in constructing the windmill with the speed and efficiency of seasoned builders. It was as if they'd built 1,000,000 windmills before, every motion practiced and deliberate. The wooden beams were hoisted into place with ease, secured tightly by ropes and makeshift pulleys, while others on the ground aligned the base with perfect symmetry. They worked like a well-oiled machine, silent and focused, their teamwork seamless. "Looks like they're adapting just fine to me," Todd remarks. Kim looked at Todd with her expression softening. "Maybe, but look at them, Todd. These kids have never seen the sun before, never felt the wind, the earth beneath their feet. This is a new experience for them, a whole new world." John took out a small coffee pot from his pack, packed it with grounds, and set it on the fire. As he sat down, with the pot already sizzling, Kim continued, "I just hope we're not pushing them too fast. The realities of survival here, it's like a tsunami. It's going to hit them hard." Tony nodded. "Maybe that's why they're so efficient this morning. Fear's a hell of a motivator." Just then, 2 small children came running up, barely more than 12 years old, struggling to help each other carry what appeared to be a miniature pyramid. They set it down carefully at John's feet. One of the kids twisted the golden section at the top, and to everyone's surprise, the sides of the pyramid split into 8 neat sections, each one unfolding to reveal a sleek golden bracer inside. One of the children stepped forward. "Jackson noticed you were using an old-fashioned communication device and wanted to send you a gift. These small communicators will work just like yours, but not so bulky." John picked up one of the bracers, examining it closely. The device was smooth, with no markings, and seemed almost too advanced for its size. He slid it onto his wrist, feeling the lightness of the metal, and nodded approvingly before handing the others out to the crew. As he stuffed the spares into his backpack, Kim raised hers with a grin. "At least they come in my favorite color, gold." Todd, curious, asked, "How did you manage to get your hands on these? I thought everything like this was lost." One of the children replied, "We managed to save one of the New World starter containers. Unfortunately, the replicator was destroyed in the cave-in, along with most of the other containers, but we saved this one, and it had 4 pyramids like this, and a hollow helper pod." John smiled, adjusting the communicator on his wrist. "Make sure Mr. Jackson knows we're grateful for the gift." The children nodded eagerly and scurried off, clearly excited to deliver the message. Bob looked around the camp. "Where did the giants go? Haven't seen them since yesterday." John glanced up from the fire, handing out cups of coffee. "Yeah, they're not around." He turned to Kim. "You go check on Jackson. Make sure everyone's adjusting to this new world." Kim pushed her coffee aside, standing up. "Yeah, I'll see if anyone needs to talk. These poor kids. This must be overwhelming for them." John snickered as she turned to leave. "You go do that," he muttered, pouring himself a cup. He waited until Kim disappeared into the distance before pulling a flask from his coat. He gave it a shake next to his ear, grimacing. He tipped the flask over his coffee, letting the last drops trickle out. Then he turned to Bob. "Looks like we might be heading back soon. A lot sooner than Kim thinks. We've done enough here. They'll be fine. We're not their babysitters." Bob sipped his coffee and grunted. "You know Kim's not going to like that plan." John shrugged. "It's not because my flask is empty, We have a crew waiting on us. We're about a week overdue. How long do you think Mr. Rocker is going to hold the ship for us before they decide we're dead and try to make it home?" Bob finished his coffee in one gulp and stood, shaking his head. "Yuck. You're right. They're not going to wait forever. Even if Bick can't fully operate the ship, he will give it another week, max, and probably send out a scouting party to find us, then attempt to leave. That's what I would do." John nodded, staring at the fire. "We need to wrap things up and move on before we're stuck here for good." Kim approached Jackson's dwelling. Two guards stood outside the door, arms crossed. One stepped forward. "State your business." Kim narrowed her eyes. "State my business? What the hell is this?" She tried to push past them, but the guards immediately blocked her path with their arms reaching out to stop her. Before she could argue, Jackson overheard the commotion and opened the door. "Let her in," he said calmly. The guards stepped aside, and Kim entered the room, immediately noticing a group of older children, perhaps late teens, all well-dressed, sitting around a makeshift table. In the center of the table lay a small device, no bigger than her hand, with a tiny hologram flickering on top of it, no more than 2 inches tall. Jackson gestured to the table. "Take a seat. We're discussing the future of Sanctuary." "Sanctuary?" Kim questioned as she sat down with her eyes scanning the room. Jackson nodded. "Yes, that's what we've decided to name the new city." Kim leaned forward. "And what's all this about?" she asked, eyeing the faces around the table. Jackson pointed to the small device. "This is a helper pod, given to me by Hope. It contains everything we need to get started on this new journey. We've already used its guidance to establish a ruling class, us, to oversee the workforce and ensure humanity's safety." Kim's eyes widened in disbelief. "A ruling class," she mumbled. Jackson continued unfazed. "I've sent the giants to gather food for the warehouses and assigned the old mining class to be the workforce for the city. They're erecting a windmill to draw water and provide power to expand the capabilities of the helper pod." "Expand its capabilities? What do you mean by that?" Kim inquired. Jackson glanced at the device with reverence. "The helper pod told us that if we don't understand what went wrong before, we're doomed to repeat it. We need to expand the pod into a fully functioning computer to help ensure our survival." Kim picked up the small pod with its hologram flickering in her hand. "Is there a way to turn this thing off?" "Of course, on the bottom," Jackson said, surprised. "But why would you want to do that?" Kim's face was a mix of shock and disgust. She turned off the device and placed it in the center of the table. The flickering light vanished, leaving the group staring in stunned silence. "I can tell you exactly where you all went wrong last time," she said, her voice rising with anger. "Relying on a machine to give you all the answers, it can only process the information you put into it. If you miss just one detail, just one piece of the puzzle, a computer will never get the right answer. You must rely on yourselves, face problems head on, and work together to solve them. You don't blindly follow a computer. Have you learned nothing?" Her hands clenched the table, her knuckles white. "I should smash this thing into 1,000 pieces right now. There will be no ruling class, not if I have anything to say about it. Everyone will participate in making this city work. Sure, we'll need decision makers, but there are no free rides. Do I make myself clear?" The room was silent. Jackson and the others exchanged uneasy glances, surprised by the fire in Kim's tone. "But this is how we've always done things," Jackson protested weakly. "It's all we've ever known since birth." "Well, it's time to start learning new ways," Kim shot back. "New traditions, a new culture, built from the ground up. Everyone is equally important, equally needed for this society to survive. If you don't understand that now, you will soon. From those who handle sanitation to those making the day's decisions, if any group decides they're too good for their job, the entire city will fail, and humanity will die off. That's why I argue that since every role is essential for the city to function, no job is more important than the other. Therefore, no person is more important than anyone else because of what they do for the city. No free rides for anyone, for any reason. Does that make sense to you now?" The group sat in stunned silence, absorbing her words. Jackson hesitated, clearly shaken. Kim's fierce gaze swept over the table, challenging anyone to argue. "Speak now, with a sound argument, or forever hold your peace." Kim shouted, slamming her fist down on the table. The room was filled with tension as Kim finished her speech. Jackson nodded slowly, absorbing her words, while the others looked at one another in quiet contemplation. Outside, the sounds of construction continued, but inside the room, the debate over the future of their new society had grown heated. Kim crossed her arms, stepping closer to the table. When the giants get back, we're going to have them flatten the mountain's edges, making large steps, terraces if you will, so you can farm and raise your own crops in safety. You're not going to rely on the giants for your sustenance. You will become 100% self-sufficient, needing no help from them at all. The group exchanged glances, Jackson hesitating before he spoke. But we've always depended on them. How are we supposed to? Kim cutting him off. You'll learn. Yes, you can maintain a coexistence, get aid and help from them when needed, but you must never become dependent on them. Do you understand? Just as she finished her sentence, a sudden uproar outside the building interrupted the conversation. There was a loud smack, followed by the door swinging open as a guard came flying in, landing hard on the ground with a resounding thud. Kim spun toward the door with her eyes wide. Bob, that was uncalled for. Bob, looking genuinely shocked, held his hands up in defense. It wasn't me. John, walking in behind him, grunted. I said step aside, boy. Kim asks, Dad, what the hell happened? Bob replies, when that boy placed a hand on your father's chest and said, state your business, well, I guess you know the rest of the story from there. Kim glared at her father. Dad, really? John shrugged. I don't take orders from children, Kim. Now what's going on in here anyway? Kim quickly filled in her father and Bob about the discussion that had transpired. John's expression darkened, and without hesitation, he stormed over to the table, locking eyes with Jackson. Look, Jackson, we didn't go through all this just for you to make the same mistakes as your ancestors, but in a different setting. John snatched the pod from the table and tossed it to Bob. Stomp on that. Jackson's eyes widened in horror. No! Bob caught the device but hesitated, holding it in his hands. Maybe that's a little extreme, sir. This pod may contain knowledge these people need to survive. We'd be robbing them of their future with such an act. John looked at Bob. You think that thing is safe? Bob nodded slightly. I suggest we put it up for a vote. This doesn't belong to us, or just the few in this room. It's one of the last remnants of an old society. My opinion is it belongs to everyone, and since you'll never get everyone to agree to destroy it, you must limit its use, only in the most dire situations, supervised by all. John scowled. I don't know, Bob. That thing's already looking to expand its capabilities. I fear hope is hiding within, waiting to be released again, and future generations will repeat their past mistakes. Bob gave a small, solemn nod. And that's exactly why it should be the people's decision. They must learn to take responsibility for themselves. John replies, I say we destroy it, because they will never agree to. We must make this hard decision for them. Kim stepped forward. Dad, didn't you say you weren't a dictator? John turned to face her with his expression softening. All right, love. What do you think we should do? Kim took a deep breath and scanned the room. It's not our decision, and it's not yours. This is their world now. We should only inform them of the potential upsides and downsides to the best of our abilities, and they, as a people, will need to decide. John stared at her for a moment with his jaw tightening. You're too much like your mother, you know that? Kim smirked, but her eyes were serious. John sighed, shaking his head. Fine, you're right, but I remind you, we'll be leaving in a few days. Kim's smirk faded as she crossed her arms again. A few days? Dad, there's no way in hell they'll be ready to be left on their own in a few days. John grumbled under his breath, but there was no denying the truth in Kim's words. He still held his ground, crossing his arms as he paced the room. If we want to ride off this island, love, we'll need to head back before Bick decides we're goners and tries to move my ship. Kim's eyes flashed with disbelief as she stepped forward. Bick would never just leave us here, Dad. John stopped pacing, turning to look at her square in the eye. His voice was steady, but there was an intensity behind it. Tell me, love, how long would you sit on board waiting, past the time we said we'd return? Kim's confidence faltered as she glanced away. Worry crept into her voice. Surely he'd wait. John didn't budge, stepping even closer. Wait for what? He pressed, his gaze unwavering. At some point he'll assume we're dead. He's got the crew to think about, and the ship. How long would you sit and wait, Kim? Really think about it. Kim's face tightened with frustration. Well, damn it, that changes everything. John chuckled under his breath. Why, Kim, would you have already left us? Bob, standing by with his arms crossed, couldn't hold back a chuckle. You know she would have, John. Hey now, you know I wouldn't, Kim snapped, glaring at them both. John smirked, leaning in slightly. What about after sending a few scouting parties to try and find us? What then? No. Kim, what would you do then in Bick's situation? Kim's jaw tightened, the truth sinking in as she clenched her fists. Damn it, she muttered, the frustration clear in her voice. We need to get back to the ship sooner rather than later. John, satisfied that the point had finally landed, gave a sly grin. Now you're seeing the full picture. This is not goodbye, nor the end. Until the story continues, my friends. B.N.Rocker.